Hello, welcome to Scientific Baits Podcast, episode 4. Slightly different format for this one. After asking people on Instagram if they'd like us to do podcasts related to the products, this is the first one. And it's going to be talking all about FermEnzyme. There's no guests on this one, so you just have to listen to me talking. So going to delve in and give people a little bit of a rundown on the story behind FermEnzyme, the best ways to use it. Talk a little bit about the captures itself, because some of the captures over the last 12 months have been absolutely phenomenal. Just another quick plug as well for the book, Bait Anthology they've written, 33,000 words. The first print runs all sold out, but it's still live on the website, so it's available to order. And I'll be getting the next print run done in January. It's £12 per copy, available on the website. Postage options for UK, Europe, and USA. So that's out of the way. So let's start with a few stories about the development and just what is FermEnzyme. So the idea for FermEnzyme came up in 2018. Never really been an advocate of using enzymes in boilies, purely and simply because there's no control over the enzymatic reaction, and you weren't left with a boilie. Even if you got the enzymes that were working, you weren't left with an intact boilie that you could use a throwing stick with, which for me sort of defeats the object. If you want to get some mashed up bait, you can do it with hydrolysates and stuff, get the same end result without going to the trouble of incorporating an enzyme into your powder mix and your eggs, and hopefully getting a reaction taking place during the cooking process. And then you come out with a pre-digested boilie, if you like, which is definitely more attractive, but not particularly usable. So it's something that I'd never gone down the route of, particularly when you got things like pre-digested fish meal, hydrolysate liquids, other liquids that have got free amino acids, peptides. And that's what most people are aiming to do with the use of enzymes. It's normally always aimed at protein digestion. Although that said, you can get lipase enzymes that'll digest the fats, but if you don't know, carp cannot detect fat molecules. So there's not really any advantage in trying to liberate the constituent molecules from fats. The same with sugars. Carp have got same with sugars. Some people have tried to use the amylase enzyme, which is the sugar digesting enzyme, in boilies. But when you can add simple liquids that have got sucrose, fructose, and glucose monosaccharides in there, there's not really any point, in my opinion, in using any sugar digesting enzymes. But the protein digesting route's been gone down many times. It has made some effective baits. I know that Dean Cowell at UCN and Pete Borton made an enzyme bait utilizing protease enzymes that I hear was an effective bait, but there was obviously problems with it rolling, distribution problems. So it was a route I'd never gone down. Now in 2018, I fished somewhere that I don't fish. Well, I haven't fished very often. I fished at Linear Fisheries. And I was basically given a lesson by a couple of young lads who were fishing zig rigs. It's not a method that I use all too often, although I have used what you would call zig rigs years ago with dog biscuits and stuff and bread. But these young guys came on using very sloppy ground baits. So it started my mind thinking back to the times I used to use ground bait. And I realised that if you could incorporate the right ingredients into a ground bait mix, then you could get a massive flood of attraction into the water of amino acids, peptides, lots of other attractive things, mainly thinking about the proteins. And so I started playing around with ground baits again. And then I thought I can take this a stage further if I can incorporate something into the ground baits that's going to liberate free amino acids, peptide fragments, etc. So I started thinking along the lines of utilizing an enzyme. And that was really when the FermEnzyme was born. I started using ground baits in the early versions of the FermEnzyme, 2018. I had some extremely good hits of fish using these mixes, incorporated into spod mixes, pilots in, crushed boilies, ground bait, the additives, etc. Few liquids, and the results were good. I think the first 2 test sessions I had on pretty easy water. I think I had 23 fish on the first session over 2 nights, 34 fish on the second session. So the initial tests indicated that it was definitely something worth pursuing. So that led me on then to delving a little bit deeper into the acquisition of a suitable enzyme, because it can be quite expensive, these things can. So yeah. So anyway, what is FermEnzyme? Well, I'll list it as a reactive bait booster, which is exactly what it is. And it's made up of, without giving the game away too much, it's made up of fish, yeast, and a spice product, and the enzyme. Now, the enzyme is what's known as cysteine protease enzyme, which sounds complicated, but the cysteine simply refers to the active site of the enzyme, and that's the amino acid that's critical for the active site of the enzyme. Now, it's a broad specificity enzyme, and that means it'll work over a large range of pHs and temperatures. Now, although it's got pH optimum and a temperature optimum, that doesn't mean that it won't be active outside of these optimums. So the pH range that it'll work at is 3 to 9, roughly, with the optimum between 5 and 8, and the temperature optimum is quite high. It's 50 degrees. So you can use warmed up liquids during the incubation period, which I have done a couple of times. So now, over the optimum pH range, 5 to 8, you'll still get over 50% activity of the enzyme between pH 5 and pH 8. So that means that you can use a whole host of liquids to activate the enzyme, because it needs a liquid added to the mix when you're making your mix up, your stick mix, your bag mix, whatever, your ground bait. You've got to use a liquid to mobilize the enzyme with the substrates that you're using. And the activity is quite good between pH 5 and 8, and that'll cover the vast majority of liquids that you'll use, whether you're buying from me or whether you're buying from other people. But with regard to the pH optimum, this is why I stress the importance of the incubation period. So mixing things up the night before will allow the enzymes to start working on the substrate. So basically, you're doing the work at home, because once the water gets cold, then the activity of the enzyme, although it'll still be ticking away very, very slowly, in situ, the activity is going to be massively reduced during cold water period. So, and what I will say is that the enzyme that I use, it's not mammalian based at all. It digests most substrates far more efficiently than trypsin and chymotrypsin, which well-known enzymes that are in the corpse digestive system, and they're just protease enzymes that our body uses as well, which these enzymes will denature around about 50 degrees. So if you're going to use these enzymes to chop things up, you couldn't really use warmed up liquids. So that's another advantage of the enzyme that I'm using. Now, if you're going to add warm liquids to your mix, which is worth doing, make sure if you've got a temperature probe or a thermometer, that's the best way of being accurate. But if you boil the cattle and leave it, as long as it's not too warm so that you can't put your finger in there, then that's about the temperature you want it at. Don't go above 80 degrees. So that'll start kicking the reaction off quite quickly. So yeah, I mean, did have a discussion with John Leyland in one of the podcasts that we did about enzymes, and John seemed to think that enzymes were either active or they weren't active. Now, there's a bit of confusion here because certain enzymes in the body, etc., do get released in an inactive form. They're what's known as zymogens. Now, the most commonly known one that you'll hear of is pepsin, which is our stomach protease. This gets released in the stomach as a zymogen in active form, but it then gets activated by the acidic conditions of the stomach. Once the hydrochloric acid is released in the stomach, that activates the enzyme. That doesn't happen with the enzyme that I'm using in the FermEnzyme. It's not in an inactive form. It's active. It's an active form of the enzyme. Just needs mobilizing with some water, and then it just needs to get the correct temperature and the correct pH for it to proceed and liberate, hopefully, free amino acids, peptides, etc. Now, also, when I was chatting to John, John mentioned that you need two types of enzymes, what's known as an endopeptidase, which acts on the insides of proteins, breaks up the large fragments into smaller fragments, and an exopeptidase to liberate free amino acids. And this is true to an extent, but there is enzymes that will have both endopeptidase and exopeptidase activity. It also depends on the starting substrate. The substrates that I'm using, one of the substrates that I'm using is already hydrolyzed. So there's free amino acid content there and peptides, etc. And I'm pretty confident that the FermEnzyme, the cysteine protease enzyme within that, is doing the job, and we're getting a far more attractive mix once the reaction has taken place. Now, as I say, initially made this for ground baits, etc., and quickly progressed on to using it in sticks and bags, which I think is possibly the best way of using it. But this then progressed to a few of the lads whilst we were testing it, to people using it to coat hook baits. Now, this wasn't something that I'd envisaged at the start, but that said, after I saw what the guys were doing, did think it was quite a novel way of using it, and it's definitely effective. So you can use it to make, if you like, a coated hook bait. And to do this, you've got to get your hook baits, hard hook baits, whatever, wafters. You could use pop-ups, but obviously you're going to stop them from popping up. And then you've got to wet them up with a suitable liquid, and then coat in the FermEnzyme, leave it to dry, and then go back maybe the next day, coat again if there's any moisture still there. And if you do this process a few times, you can end up with, say, a 16mm hardened hook bait that's 20 millimeters in size, and the FermEnzyme will actually go hard on the outside of the coating. That's because all the water all the moisture in the mix is all dried out, the reaction stopped, and you're left with a coated hook bait. Now, once it goes into the water, this coating will obviously start breaking down. And in the warm months, the reaction will kick back in. I would imagine that the reaction is running reasonably well if the water's quite warm. And the lads have had good results using it in this way. I myself have not used it much this way, although I've caught fish using it this way. I've mainly used it in sticks and bags. So, talk a little bit about the best way to use it in a stick mix or a bag mix. Now, you could use it with the Halo mixed ground baits. Crush boilies is particularly good, which I'll talk about in a minute. Or you could use pallets. Now, the reason why I particularly favour using a crush boilie is because the boilie has been cooked and it's a little bit harder, depending on how much you grind it down. You can end up with fragments of boilies there that once in the water will stay there for a little bit longer than a ground bait or finely ground down powder. So depending on the temperature of the water, the reaction could continue. Because like I say, although these enzymes do have optimum pHs and temperatures, that doesn't mean they stop working. It does not mean they stop working. Generally, there'll be something going on there. But as I say, it's very important to incubate these mixes somewhere reasonably warm for a day or two before you go out and fish and use them. Particularly now, this time of the year, very important to incubate your stick mixes in your bags. Tie your bags up a couple of days before, maybe inject the liquid into them, whatever, pour the liquid. You can, there's many permutations of how you can go about creating these FermEnzyme traps. So for me, the best way to use it is stick mixes and bags. Although I had some good results using it in ground baits in the warmer months, leaving the ground baits overnight and stuff, feeding by hand in the margins. So as I say, 2018 started testing it. Then 2019 started fishing in other water, using it in sticks and in spod mixes. The results were good on there. 2020, same again. Caught some bigger fish then. A few of the lads started testing it. One of the lads was using the early stage hook baits coated in a couple of the things that are in the FermEnzyme. And he had the biggest fish from the home pool, small home pool in the Cotswolds. He had Snoopy at 36.14. So that was a good result. So yeah. And then 2021, more people using it. Lots of people are catching using it. But this year, the results have really surpassed all expectations this year. It's helped anglers to catch some real big English carp. Matt Kirkham, who uses our bait, has caught the largest fish that's in Granville Lake using our Frankie mix and FermEnzyme sticks, mixed with another product that we sell, the Kraken Squid, which is an excellent addition. Stick mixes, bag mixes, and yeah, that was his first bite from the lake. He'll be the first person that's ever used the Frankfurter bait on Granville Lake, and he'll be the first person that's ever used the FermEnzyme there. So to catch the biggest fish that's in the lake, although it's done 65 pound, it was 61.4 when he caught it. Another lad started using the FermEnzyme on tricky water. Ended up catching a late record English fish, 52 pound. Caught 2 fish that session. Both fish were caught fishing over FermEnzyme sticks, crush boilies, not our boilies, but he was doing exactly as I said to him. He was crushing his boilies up, mixing it with the FermEnzyme, mixing some liquid in, incubating a day or two before he went fishing. Bang, there you go. Another real big English fish, 52 pound. And then it's done numerous fish, over 30 this year. And it's still catching for people now. Lad from Leicester's had a very good result on it last weekend. He's had a 38, a new PB, and a 37, and a 20 using the FermEnzyme. And he was also incorporating it into his mix. He was fishing crush boilie, adding FermEnzyme to it, some liquid. I think he was incubating it before he went fishing. So he was spotting that out, and then he was fishing the sticks over the top. And bang, there you go again. Another very, very good result. So, as you can see, this works. It takes a little bit more effort than just getting some boilies out of the freezer, but if you utilise it properly and you stick with it, it's produced some very, very good results. I mean, the first big fish that I caught using it, well, the first real big, decent fish, 30-pounder, that was the only 30 that was out of that lake all week in 2020, October. I was fishing as a guest, did a few nights. The lake was fishing particularly hard. I tied up a bag that had got some Halo mixed ground bait in, crush boilies, FermEnzyme, shrimp liquid. And I left the bag. For a good 24 hours before I actually cast it out. So I let the reaction kick in. Probably could have left it a little bit longer because the temperatures are not that high in October. Although it wasn't cold, and it was in the bivvy, so it's quite warm in the bivvy. So yeah, I mean that was another nice result. But as you can see, there's some solid science behind it. And if you use it, as I suggest, incubating the stick mixes, the bags, or your crush boilies, your spod mixes, etc., the incubation period is very, very important to get the best out of the product. Very, very important. And for the price of it, £9 for a 500ml pot, it's I think it's something that's well worth anyone buying. And the results certainly speak for themselves. So hopefully that's given you a little bit more of an insight, a little bit more understanding into the FermEnzyme, how best to utilise it, and hopefully catch some fish if you use it. We are out of stock of it at the moment. It's still live on the website because I'm waiting for the delivery of the enzyme. Just run out because I sold quite a few pots of this over the last few months. So anybody who orders the FermEnzyme now from www.scientificbaits.co.uk, you're probably not going to get it until the new year, because I don't think I'll risk posting things out after next week with the Christmas rush with the couriers. It's probably going to be the new year when they start sending the next parcels out. So hopefully you got something from this. It's giving you a bit more of an insight into the FermEnzyme, development of it, how it actually works, how you can use it, and how you can incorporate it into your fishing. Hopefully catch some fish. Bye for now.